Okay, so I erased that just to show you that here, cosine squared over theta, we move that, reciprocate it, multiply straight across, we get cosine squared over sine squared, which results in a cotangent squared, and we're done. So I could go back to having room down here for C and D. Now hopefully you tried C and D on your own, and you're just here to check your answers. If not, then you can follow along with me, or once again, pause, try it on your own, see how you do, come back and check it with me. So letter C and letter D, I think it's kind of tricky to decide which side is more complicated, which side you should start working on. So my advice to you is anytime you see a plus or minus sign, you work with that side. Because it's really hard to take this multiplication and undo it to add in a plus or minus sign. It's easier to try and get rid of that minus sign and just make terms that you're multiplying together. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to leave my left-hand side the same. So secant, cosecant stays like that. And then I'm going to manipulate the right-hand side. So what I see on the right-hand side is that tangent could be rewritten as sine over cosine. And I see that cotangent could be rewritten as cosine over sine. Now once you do that, you have to get a common denominator. So your common denominator is sine cosine or cosine sine, right? If we're going to put these two terms together, we want to have a single denominator. So this first fraction is missing the sine, and the second fraction is missing the cosine. So now my new numerator, well, sine times sine is sine squared theta, cosine times cosine is cosine squared theta, and hopefully, once again, your alarm bells are going off in your head, and you're saying, oh right, sine squared plus cosine squared, that's so awesome, because that simplifies so nicely, and it becomes a 1, right? And then I get 1 over sine and cosine. Well, for those of you that still aren't seeing it, 1 over sine and 1 over cosine, right? If you separate it like this, which some of you probably didn't need to separate it, 1 over sine is cosecant theta, 1 over cosine is secant theta, and that's exactly what we have here on the left-hand side. We have secant theta, cosecant theta, so we are, in fact, done. Now, do you have to write both of these steps? No, of course not. You could have jumped right from here to here and you're done. I just wrote this out so people could see exactly what's happening. 1 times 1 is 1, sine times cosine. So there you have it. Okay, for letter D, think for a second. Which side do you want to work with? The left-hand side or the right-hand side? Okay, hopefully you just said to yourself, I'm going to work with the left-hand side because it looks more complicated. And that is, in fact, true. The left-hand side, you have to multiply things out. We're going to have to FOIL right here. First, outside, inside, last. That's way more complicated than this over here. How am I going to undo this to make 2 parentheses? Okay, it's too tricky. So the first thing I have to do, I have to multiply cosecant times sine. Well, cosecant theta times sine theta. Well, some of you in that first step might be able to rewrite cosecant as 1 over sine. So cosecant theta times sine theta, and then cosecant theta times positive 1. Obviously, I'm going to run out of room here. And then here I have negative 1 times sine theta, so negative sine theta. And then I have negative 1 times positive 1, so minus 1. Okay, good. I was able to fit it all in. Okay, well, this first one, I can rewrite cosecant as 1 over sine. So 1 over sine times sine, well, what happens to 1 over sine times sine? So anywhere I see a cosecant, I'm going to rewrite it as a sine theta. Okay, so I rewrote this one, I rewrote this one. Here, this is a multiplication sign. We multiplied these two together. So therefore, I'm multiplying these two together. My signs cancel. I end up with just a 1 there. So now I have 1 plus 1 over sine theta minus sine theta minus 1. Okay, well, what happens? Here my 1 and my minus 1 cancel. I really shouldn't show that here, to be honest. This should stay a 1, Sorry about that. 1 plus and then a minus 1 here. So my next line could be to simplify, getting rid of these 1's right here. So it's 1 over sine theta minus sine theta. Okay, now you could have combined some of these steps. That's okay. Okay, then finally, well, if I have a fraction, whenever you have a fraction, you have a denominator, you've got to get a common denominator. We don't want to have this minus sign. There's no minus sign over here. So that means I need to get a common denominator. So I'm going to get a common denominator of sine. The 1 doesn't change, but on this second one, right, I would have to multiply, the top and bottom by sine. So now I have 1 minus sine squared theta. Well, what is sine squared theta? That's the same, or sorry, what is 1 minus sine squared theta? That's cosine squared theta. So now I have cosine squared theta over sine theta. And then one more step, or maybe you don't even need to do that because you can see that's the same as cosine tangent theta. Why? Because cosine, sorry, I'm going to do a little side note right here. Cosine squared is cosine times cosine. So cosine over 1 times cosine over sine. Cosine over 1 is just cosine theta. Cosine over sine is cotangent theta. Oops, I wrote that wrong down here. I was worried there for a second. So it's cotangent theta. So yes, indeed, I did prove exactly what I was supposed to prove, and that is that the product of cosecant theta minus 1 times sine theta plus 1 equals the product of cosine times cotangent. So there you have it. So again, what are your strategies? Definitely you want to work with more complicated side. I would say anytime you see a cosecant, secant, or cotangent, or cosecant or secant, you change it into terms of sine or cosine. If you see a tangent or cotangent, you might want to change those into terms of sine and cosine. If you have fractions, you must get a common denominator. Look for the Pythagorean identities to simplify the problems. So remember, you don't have to do any book work tonight. We're going to work on those problems in class. So when you get stuck, you can ask your friends. If you still can't figure it out, you can ask me. So you have that opportunity, if you get stuck, to ask questions. So the whole next class, we're going to work on these questions. And then, of course, we can talk about the quiz and talk about maybe questions you might still have about graphing or periodicity or other things in the chapter. Okay, have a great weekend. I will see you soon. Bye.